All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Let's Try This Again. My name is, wait.
What is
Let's
your
try
name?
this again. Let's try this again. My name is Steven Conway, and this is my
I'm
wife.
Tamara Conway or Tammy. Yep.
Yeah, we're so happy that you guys could join us tonight and for the rest of this week as we'll be exploring how we can have a reboot
Mm-hmm.
in terms of our relationships, our communication, all of that.
Yeah. So a lot of people have asked, is this just for married people? And no, it's not.
No,
right?
that's right.
It's
That's
not
right.
for married people. Relationships are a part of our everyday life, right? They are a part of marriage, of course, but before you get married, you're in relationships with people, with your
Mhm.
mama and your daddy.
Mhm.
You're in relationships with your siblings. You're in relationships with people at your job. You have relationships with
That's
people
right.
at your job.
That's right. That's
You
right.
do?
Your people at school,
School,
your
teachers.
teacher, professor,
Yeah.
classmates.
Yeah.
So there are relationships all around us. And who hasn't been benefited when someone smiles at you, even if that individual is a complete stranger? Who hasn't been blessed, as it were?
Yeah.
If someone in the grocery store is kind, someone in the department store is helpful. So all of those are relationships.
Now, everybody ain't
This
always
is true.
kind.
This is true.
And everybody's not always giving you a smile, right? I remember when we lived in New York some years ago, and I remember we had moved from Tennessee, two distinctly different cultural contexts, for real.
Mhm.
And we were walking along the street with Israel, I believe, and we're so used to everybody waving, And
Mhm.
if you live or you're from the South, you know how that is, right? We don't even know you, and people just wave at you. And it took me a minute to adjust because I'm a city girl. And I remember asking you when I married you and moved there, I was like, do we know them?
Like, no. That's just how people are.
That's
now.
just how
They
people
wave as they're driving by. In
Right.
the grocery store, people want to strike up conversations.
However, when we moved to New York, we got a
Mm.
different experience walking through Manhattan holding, our son's hand. And people were, our son was so used to people saying hi or waving that when he waved at them, they wouldn't wave back. They wouldn't even say hi. And do you remember what his response was?
No, I don't.
He started to cry. He was like, "Mommy, why isn't anybody waving back at me?"
Mhm.
So that shows
Are you sure that was him or you?
It may have been me too. That's true. It may have been me.
It was a serious wake up call, but
Yeah.
definitely a different context, different cultural context, and it brought a lot of challenges and different things with it.
So normally when people hear the word culture, sometimes people think of race, right? Isn't that true? We think that that's what we're talking about. But really, actually, when we talk about culture, what are we talking about?
We're talking about patterns and learned behavior. And even if you're part of the same culture or from the same part of the world, your family can have different patterns of behavior, different cultural or different norms than someone who lived down the street from you.
Wow. So what you're saying is that in our homes, we have a culture.
Yes.
And even though me and you come from what most people would consider to be a similar culture, right? We're both African American, but man, our homes were different, weren't they?
Yes.
So culture can be very broad. And those things that we grow up watching and listening and learning actually impact who we end up being, right?
That's right.
Or maybe how we see the world.
Yeah. So this is extremely important for us, for Tamara and I. It's a passion of ours.
Yeah.
Relationships, and we've been married for over 20 years. We have 4 children.
Yes.
And we've had the opportunity and the privilege to be able to delve into the topic of relationships literally around the world.
Yeah.
And that's given us a powerful perspective that is quite different from the one that we grew up with.
Oh, yeah.
It has challenged and stretched us. And but with that challenging and stretching, we've seen a profound opportunity to help others to be able to understand how to better communicate, get along, love each other, have success in relationships.
Yeah. Now, as he explained to you, a lot of that learning happened by trial and error in our own relationship, right?
My trials, your errors.
Right? Okay, whatever. But nonetheless, our experience, I don't know about you, but I had no real manual, right, on relationship as far as marriage, let alone a manual on just even how to operate as having health as a woman, or how to view parenting as a mom, right? I, much like you, we had models, right? But there is no perfect model. And we had some baggage of our own that we brought with us that shaped and molded those things as well. And so a lot of the things that we're going to share with you, you're going to find us probably sharing our own story. One is because we believe in transparency and honesty, not to the detriment of that you need to know everything about us, but we like to throw ourselves under the bus, like you like to say, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll be sharing really honestly the things that we've learned and things that we're continuing to learn, because boy, oh boy, it's not over. You know, we've entered recently into being parents of a young adult, which is real. That's a real thing. You know?
Yes, yes. And the other thing that we want to share from the outset is that what we are going to be talking about is universal.
Yeah.
Because as we've stated, relationships are universal and they are universally important. But we are coming, admittedly, from a Christian perspective.
Yeah.
Now, we believe that that Christian perspective has universal principles that are applicable to every man, woman, boy, or girl, no matter where you find yourself on the face of planet Earth, no matter what your religious or cultural backgrounds are. We believe that there are principles that are universal, and we want to share those with you.
Yeah. So you will hear us maybe share some biblical examples. We'll share examples from just real life events or people that we know. And we are not experts. These are just things that we have learned along the way. And so, we invite you to join us this week, and we're excited.
Yeah, tonight we want to begin and jump into this by talking to you about self-awareness. Self-awareness. And self-awareness is something that probably many of you would say, hey, look, I understand, I know, I get it, I'm self-aware. But we found a fascinating article in the Harvard Business Review, and it was written by Dr. Tasha Eurich. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about that article. And by the way, before we go too fast, there may be some of you joining who did not have a chance to register, and some of you who did register and you're waiting for your prize, like out of the Cracker Jack box. Well, here's your prize. Your prize is going to be that we are going to share some of the materials with you. So we will give you links to articles and different things that we've used in our research for what we're talking about, giving you an opportunity to be able to peruse through those things for yourselves and to be able to gain some insights that quite possibly we didn't talk about as we spent time together.
Yeah.
So we want to begin again by talking about self-awareness.
I think most people probably believe that they are self-aware. Honestly, I think that if you were to ask someone like, man, do you think you know yourself? Do you think you're aware of your innermost, thought? They're like, absolutely. I know when I'm sad. I know when I'm mad. I know when I'm happy. I know when I have joy. Yeah, I feel like I know myself.
That's an interesting thing, because we were talking about this. There are parts of our stories that we are not really familiar with. So there's a part of every one of our stories that was being written before we literally took our first breath. So if you think about it, when your mother was pregnant with you, there was discussion about whether you would be a boy or a girl, or whether you would look like your mother or your father, or would you have the attitude and demeanor of your mother's side of the family or your father's side of the family, or were you going to look like your great uncle, 3 times removed, or whatever.
Disposition, probably even.
So all of that was a part of each and every one of our stories, but we weren't privy to that information. We don't even, and in some cases, we still aren't privy to that information unless we enter into conversation, unless we broach the conversation with those who were privy to that conversation before we were born.
And the interesting thing about that is for many of us, the womb experience really isn't important. you know, save for it being a situation if somebody was going through a health issue, if there was addiction involved and things of that nature. But we tend not to really consider the womb experience to be important to a person's self-awareness. It was mind-blowing to me to learn, you know, many years ago that, yeah, babies actually do hear, you know, things when they're in the womb. They actually can perceive threats. They can actually feel the mood of the mom. They can actually, you know, somewhat pick up on the interaction between the mother and the father. You know what I'm saying? Because there's this emotional, you know, connection. And, you know, so babies actually, maybe not on the sophisticated level like us, but they actually are aware in the womb. And those things actually do show up and come through in our perspectives as we grow. You wonder to yourself, like, why do I respond the way I do to certain things? And, you know, why is it that certain things bother me, or certain tastes and things of that nature? So the womb experience actually really is powerful.
Yeah. And this article that we'll share with you guys later on, there was a series of 10 studies, and they watched 5,000 different individuals, and they examined what self-awareness really is. And they were taking a look at why we need it, and so forth and so on. And so they found out that there were two types of self-awareness. Two types. Yeah. One of them is in reference to what we think or how we perceive ourselves. So when you hear us talk about self-awareness, you're like, what are they talking about in terms of a story that's being written before? How on earth does that have anything to do with my perception of myself? So one of the portions of self-awareness is how we perceive ourselves, and the other one has to deal with those who we're in community with. So that's why we brought that up, because that was one of the elements. But they found out something extremely interesting. They found that even though most people believe that they are self-aware, and I want you guys, by the way, you can talk to us if you're joining us on YouTube, give us some comments or whatnot. But I want to know how many of you believe that you are self-aware. Well, this is what they found out. They found out that even though most people believe, they are self-aware, self-awareness is truly a rare quality. They estimate that only 10 to 15% of the people that they studied actually fit the criteria for being self-aware. 10 to 15%.
Wow.
So, you know, probably 90% of us think we know ourselves, but in reality, it's only 10 to 15% of us that actually,
that's not a lot,
possess self-awareness.
Yeah.
All right. So that means that more of us are, quite frankly, lost in terms of who we are. And remember those two elements, how we perceive ourselves and how we are perceived in community. 10 to 15%.
So our beginnings, it makes me think about the importance of that, you know, how not only linking that, but it's growing with us as we're getting older and we're developing. And man, 5,000 people, only 10 to 15%. You know, you think you know yourself, you know, but it turns out that you don't know as much as you think you do, or at least in the manner in which it may show up, you know, in your life. Wow. So how do you think that actually impacts relationship? If those statistics are true, which I don't doubt they are, right? How can that lack impact, or do you even believe that actually impacts relationships?
Yeah, of course. If I don't know how I show up or how I'm perceived, and we'll touch on this because there was some things in the study that they brought out that were quite interesting. Some things that hinder our ability to experience self-awareness. But if we don't know how we show up, if I don't know how I show up at work, and if I'm not conscious of how my peers in my workplace view me, how my peers or my neighbors even, how they view me, if I'm not aware of those things, then it makes for a bumpy ride for anyone who's going to live next door to me, anyone who's going to work in the cubicle or in the office.
in the house with
across
you?
from me, or someone that's going to live in the house
Man.
with me.
All right. So we'll get back to these two. So you said that there's actually two different aspects of self-awareness. What are those?
Internal and external. Basically.
Internal and external. So internal, what is that looking like?
That's my own thoughts and perceptions about who I am and how I show up in relationship.
Okay. And then the other one, which is external.
That's my awareness of other people's perceptions of me and how I show up in relationships. I want to share this with you. Also, that though we're saying self-awareness is a positive thing, it can also be a negative thing.
Really?
Self-awareness can be an extremely negative thing.
Wow.
For those who suffer from anxiety and depression, we might even suggest that there's an ability to be overly self-aware and especially hypercritical of one's
self-conscious. Maybe that going in that direction, you're very self-conscious about.
Right. Always thinking, maybe even overthinking and over processing. What are people thinking about me? I know that I didn't do this right or I didn't do that right. And so we can focus in on mistakes or our insecurities, and that can lead us down a road that's not a positive one.
That's interesting, because when I think about that, the thoughts that come to my mind is that you can actually have, when in the context of relationship, because that can be difficult, right? Imagine being in a relationship with someone. And when we say relationship, that's broad, working with someone, being married to someone, in relationship of various different kinds, with someone who is overly self-aware, self-conscious, I guess the other word that you use, I forgot what that was, but in that realm, how can that negatively or definitely cause a strain, in a relationship that someone can have with them? Because generally, if we are self-conscious, we just think, well, it's just me, right? My self-consciousness doesn't impact anybody else.
Yeah, well, at least one way that can affect is you said it's just me. And so when we are overly self-conscious or self-aware, then it becomes all about you.
Self-centered.
So, right. So I might be sharing with you a challenge that I'm having, or talking to you about my general experience. And, sometimes, you are thinking, are they talking about me? Is this something that I did? Maybe they don't. And when the conversation is really not about you. And so, but as you brought out, I can have a hard time listening to someone else and empathizing with someone else when I am overwhelmed with my thoughts about myself. And so I have these filters on, and when you're speaking, my thoughts are, they're talking about me.
Wow.
They're talking about me. So when the boss stands up and begins to share about changes in the workplace, I might be thinking, well, what did I do? They did this because of me.
Wow.
And so it can be dangerous. And if I'm always thinking about myself and you need somebody to listen to you, then you're not going to be the person that I want to be in a healthy relationship with, because every time I start talking to you about my experience,
it's taken into a different direction.
We always end up talking about your experience.
Right.
Now, Tamara happens to be a grief recovery counselor. And one of the things that you share with people is that when it comes to grief, we should not say what to people.
I understand. I know what that's like. I've been, see, that same thing happened to me. So, listen, don't worry. I know exactly what you're going through.
Whoa. Hold on.
It seems natural, right?
Time out.
Yeah.
So you mean, even if someone has gone through something that is in many ways similar to something that I've gone through, say, loss of a spouse, loss of parents, loss of employment, even loss of faith, that I shouldn't say, I know exactly what you're going through?
Yes, because you don't. Now that seems really strange. I know. I've actually had a lot of talks with people when I go around and I do, talks and lectures and stuff like that. That's one of the major things that most people raise their hand and say, I don't agree with you. It's like, I do know what that's like. I lost my mom too. Or I know what it's like. I lost my dog, or I lost my job. I do know what that feels like. And to a degree, it is true, but it's not the truth. Right. And what makes it not the truth? Let me ask you that. It is a true statement that you have experienced the loss of X, Y, or Z, but it is not true. It is not the truth that you what?
Well, my mother is not your mother.
That's right.
My father is not your father. My job is not your job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my relationship, my finances are not your finances.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience in some way is uniquely mine.
Yeah. So there are a couple of ways you can actually approach this. One is you can be intellectually honest about it. You can say, you know what? At best, I know what I felt when I lost my mom. I know what it felt like for me when I lost my job.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want you to know I'm here to listen. You know, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when I jump into in with good intentions, trying to help, when I jump into the sharing of my story and my experience, as a means of saying I understand because I went through the same thing.
Yes.
I'm really not allowing that person to share their experience, their story.
Yes.
And I can kind of crowd them out by sharing mine.
Or another way to handle that situation would be to just listen. What we call that is being a heart with ears, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am there and I am listening to you. I'm not interrupting you. I'm not giving you answers. I'm not trying to fix it because you cannot fix it. Grieving people don't need to be fixed, and grieving people don't need you to give them answers. They really just need someone to listen to them to be able to go through that. But we're actually going to get more into that throughout the week.
Yep.
Talking about grief.
Yep. So one of the other points, and we're going to, hit a couple of points here before we let you go. But one of the other points that they made or concluded from this study is that people who have power and experience, people who have power and experience tend to be less self-aware. People with power and experience tend to be less self-aware.
That seems very contradictory to me. It does when I heard that, because people who walk in self-confidence, it's like they know, people who have power, you know what I'm saying? It's like, isn't that the reason why they have power? Because they have this sense of awareness that allows them to be able to, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of an interesting dynamic, but I know you're going to explain why that is.
Yeah, well, it's actually I had to think about that too, because I'm like, what? How did they get here?
Yeah.
But when you think about it, I think it makes sense, because so often what we do when we're in community and in relationship is we tend to lean on our experiences. We were alluding to this when we were talking about grief.
Yeah.
So my experience with grief makes me an expert on your experience with grief. But that's not true.
Yeah.
Because my experience is my experience. And so I can become so comfortable, a person can become so into our experiences that we stop listening to the experiences of others. And because my experience is true, because it's my experience, I don't know that I come off as a know-it-all. I don't know or recognize, I'm not aware that I come off as arrogant. I'm not aware that I come off as unsympathetic. I'm not aware that I come off as any number of things. And I'm just telling you, I've been here, I've done that, and so forth and so on. And so people with experience can tend to have lower self-awareness.
That's interesting, because you know, there's a part of us that when we have experiences, right? There is this exchange within the community, the wisdom that we gain, right, from our experiences. There should be an exchange of, I've lived a certain life, and these are the things that I learned, the things that I thought were good, the things that worked and didn't work, and I'm going to share that with you, right? So that is healthy within a community. But it sounds to me that there is an experience that we also can have where our experiences are not necessarily about exchanging, because exchange is a two-way street. It is me actually dumping on someone else, or maybe even trying a sense of control, You know what I'm saying? Like, because this is what happened to me, this is what's going to happen to you.
So it would be akin to my wife taking off her prescription glasses and giving them to me and saying, once you look through these,
You're gonna be
you
all
will
right.
understand and you will see clearly. But the truth is, if I'm looking through her glasses,
Can you see? Ooh.
Everything is fuzzy. And these are all
fuzzy.
scratched up too. So things get fuzzy and things get blurry. Why? Because those are prescribed for her, not for me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so people, sometimes our experiences can get in the way of us being self-aware. Wow. The other thing is power. The other thing is power. And I read a book, and in this book, this gentleman was he was a CEO for many years, and he had become a consultant. And he was in one of his first consulting gigs, and he's looking at his papers, and he's finished with everything. And so he closes up his notebook, and he stands up and he says, "Okay, everybody, I think we're done for the day." So the CEO that he's consulting for, the CEO says, "Well, you know, Jim, maybe you should have a seat. I don't think we're quite done yet." Now, at that very moment, he recognized something that for years he had just taken for granted, because he had been the CEO. Whenever he stood up, the meeting was over.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize that maybe somebody else had something to say. Maybe there were other people who felt there was unfinished business, but because he was the man that was in charge, the big boss, so to speak, when he got up, the meeting literally ended. But here he is as a consultant, and he's like, "Okay, everybody, that's it, time to go." And the CEO hadn't stood up yet. Listen. And the CEO says, "No, have a seat. We got some more business to handle." Yeah. So we can get so used to doing things a certain way, again, that we are unaware of what's going on around us, and how the community is perceiving us. Why? Because I'm knocking off all the things on my agenda, right? And I'm trying to get things done, but I don't know how that's playing in the rest of the room.
Man, that happens a lot in life in so many different areas. Yes, in business and in our jobs. How many people have jobs where they have maybe taken on a lesser role, but they still have the mindset of the one who was the leader, or the one who was the, captain, or the one who was, and it's so hard to relinquish and let go, because it's time to let go, or maybe something happened, you know what I'm saying? And you need to play in a different role. And so we find ourselves ending up in clashes with people, because I'm still thinking from a role that I no longer, hold on now. Yeah. A role that I no longer have, right?
Wow.
And so I'm in conflict with people in my life. I'm gonna let you say something about that. I'm gonna let you say something
because
about
you mentioned that at work.
Yeah.
But how about for those who have children?
Oh goodness! Now look, now you're getting personal. Don't be trying to come after me.
I've been a parent. I've been a parent of a newborn, an infant, a toddler, a teenager, a young adult. Ooh. And as maybe some of you have heard, your mother or your father or your grandmother or your grandfather, your auntie or your uncle, you always going to be so-and-so's baby, right? But the fact is, you're 6'3" and 275 pounds.
And paying taxes.
Right. You're not wearing diapers anymore. You don't have a pacifier. You're not still sucking on the bottle. Yes. You're a grown man. You are a grown woman. You're college, university educated. You're at the top of your field, so forth and so on. But there is someone or some people who are still looking at you as though you are their baby. And it's a challenge to be able to let go of the role of parent. Now, let me suggest this. I don't know that we ever stop being parents.
No.
But certainly the role and the influence and the impact that we have on the lives of our children, it changes as the years go by. Ooh. And because so many of us are not willing to change with that, you have young men and young women who want independence. They want to get away. But we could go further.
We're going to talk more. So during the week, we're going to talk more about this phenomenon, okay, of parenting and adulting and all that other stuff. We're going to get more into that. But it is a real thing that you're bringing up, this area of relinquishing, or the exchange of roles in life, that self-awareness, like I'm now aware that I'm no longer there. I'm here now. Age. I'm getting older. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm no longer able to operate in a certain capacity that I used to. I need to relinquish my car keys. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yes.
Like those things are real and they are a struggle. And sometimes when we're not self-aware, we can end up in some really bad accidents. I'm just thinking about that, right? An older person who needs to relinquish those keys. But man, I'm used to having this self-reliance that now I need to know I'm going to drive myself, and we end up getting into trouble. And that's how sometimes it can happen in our relationships as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The last thing we want to talk to you about is, well, actually, before we talk to you about that last thing, you and I were talking about in the Bible, King David.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people have read the story of King David, and especially in 2 Samuel chapter 11, King David, when he's visited by Nathan, he acts surprised about being called out in terms of his sin.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh man, that's me. And a lot of people have read that and they're like, come on, brother. Are you really telling me that you didn't know that what you were doing was? And the reality is, yes, he knew, but yes, he didn't know. Right. So it's easy for us to look from our 21st century Western perspective and say, oh man, you knew exactly what you were doing. But the reality is that in the world that David lived in the East, that it was completely admissible for a king to take
socially acceptable
and even expected for a king to take from his subjects whatever he wanted, right? And then pay them for what he took. Now David should have known better, because he should have been living by a different ethical standard. But because he allowed himself to be caught up in what everyone else was doing, he just lost self-awareness, a sense of self-awareness. And he began to do what was socially acceptable until when it's called to his attention that, hey, this is actually against the ethical standard that you're supposed to be living by. He's caught off guard and he seems as though, wait, what just happened? Right? And I think all of us are capable of going there. All of us are capable of doing what everybody else is doing around us, to the point where we lose track of the ethical standard that we're supposed to be living by, operating by. And, everybody else is cheating on the time at work. Everybody else is doing X, Y, and Z. So I'll do it as well. And so we lose sight again of a higher ethical standard that we're supposed to be living by.
That's powerful. So our self-awareness definitely plays a role and a part in how we even choose to operate and see how we are interacting and moving with the relationships in our lives. Because surely he violated, so self-awareness is a must in order for us not only to not violate ourselves, but not to violate other people.
Yeah. And if you think about this, internationally, there are, in the history of this world, there are times when it was socially acceptable to do certain things and to treat people in certain ways. Right. And we wonder, like, how on earth could people who were supposed to be religious, whether it's in the East or in the West, Northern or Southern hemisphere, how on earth could people who were supposed to have a religious ethic, how could they do this? It's because it was socially acceptable to do it, right? And again, people become disconnected from the ethic that they're supposed to live by, and we can easily get caught up in what everybody else is doing. Now, we want to draw to a close here tonight, and hope you enjoyed a little bit about what we've been sharing this evening. But it's widely assumed, this is again from this Harvard Business Review article that came from a study. It's widely assumed that introspection, or examining the causes of our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, improves self-awareness. Because someone who's joining us tonight might say, man, I always review, I kind of, go over the events of a day, a week, a month, to kind of make sure where I am. So I think a lot. I process A lot.
Hmm.
Well, what they found out is, and this was a surprising finding, people who introspect are less self-aware and actually report worse job satisfaction and well-being. There's other research which is linked to in the article that has shown similar patterns. And here's the rub. So you think, well, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that the more I reflect, actually the worse self-aware I am, and the less I am in connection with, the people in my community. The problem with introspection isn't that it is categorically ineffective. I'm reading directly from the article here. It's that most people are doing it incorrectly. To understand this, they come to the questions that we ask ourselves. And one of the questions that we generally ask ourselves is the question, why? Yeah. So
that's definitely a huge
why
question.
do I feel the way I do? Raise your hands if you've ever asked yourself that question. You've had an experience at work or at church or at home, in your neighborhood with family. And it's like, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
Right. And when we process and we ask that question, we believe that, and I can't deny that there's a lot of good stuff that can come out of asking
from why.
The why.
Yeah.
But what is the hang up with why?
Why is a broad thing. I'm learning that in school currently, right? When doing research, you are looking at the evidences, right, that are presented there. But oftentimes the reason why they cannot draw permanent conclusions is because you can't necessarily answer the question why, because you can't get into the head of an individual. You can't understand the intent and the heart of the issue. So at best, what research can do is it can collect the data. Right. And you have to come up to your own conclusions, and which a lot of people do in research. Yeah.
And that is fascinating. You mentioned your own conclusions.
Which can be dangerous.
That's fascinating. In fact, this article, it pointed out that, we lack to be aware. It means in Webster's dictionary, to be aware means to have a perspective. And so if you follow me, having a perspective is good.
Yeah.
But oftentimes when we reflect and when we're introspective, we make a perspective the perspective.
That's true.
Right?
That's what I see is what goes. Is what I know what I saw.
Yes. And so it becomes the truth. My truth becomes the truth.
Wow.
And so, but here's the thing. I don't understand all the motives and unconscious thoughts that are driving me, let alone that are driving the people that I'm in community with.
Now that I think is where we actually are touching on something that's very powerful. And we're talking about how this affects relationship. Because what I do have the ability to do, because the truth is, I don't even know myself. First of all, let me show you a scripture here. There's a scripture found in 2 Corinthians 13:5, and it says, examine yourselves, ... prove your own selves, ... do you even know yourselves? ... And so, as we talked about from the very beginning, we think we do. But how many of us, as we grow and as we get older and we learn, that we come to find out that what I thought about myself and what I knew about myself, I find out more stories. Maybe my parents had some other things to share with me, cousins and aunties and uncles, or there's just other information that I find out. And I'm like, wow, I thought this about myself.
Yeah.
Or I just live life and I change.
Yeah. That's crazy. This goes back to something we mentioned earlier about experience.
Yes.
So I have an experience with you.
Yeah.
And I say, aha, I know why she did that. And I
know the why.
What I use, the why, the answer to the why is something that I experienced 25 years ago with a completely different person. But my mind tells me that this is exactly the same thing that I'm experiencing with you.
Yes.
And so I give you motives, I invest motives, and so forth and so on.
I also stopped listening. I stopped giving people the benefit of the doubt. I stop all of these things that are involved in what is required to have healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not that there's a problem with reflecting,
Absolutely not.
being introspective.
Yeah.
The problem is that we are so confident
Yes.
about the conclusions that we reach,
yes,
when we have only dealt with the surface things that we've thought and felt, and without really knowing the motives and so forth and so on. So here's what we'll close with this evening. Instead of asking why, they suggest that the best or the better question is to ask what.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. What?
So, for instance, I have an experience with my wife, and I'm asking, why do I feel the way that I do about what it is that transpired between us, and why did she do the things that she did? But a more effective question, the better question is, what were the things that brought us to conflict? What were the things that transpired that brought us to the point of conflict?
So that's me actually asking. It is me. And when you ask, that denotes that you are actually open to receive something different. Whereas when you already have the thing why, right, in your head, most times you already have a formula in your brain. The what is opening up the door to say, here, I'm willing to hear your perspective. What was the reason, right? And that's powerful. How many times do we not do that when it comes to our relationships with people, whether it's at work, whether it's at church, whether it's with our children, you know what I'm saying? Whether it is with our people that we're in relationship, marriage, at our jobs. Oftentimes we don't even talk to each other. We have conflict and people normally go like this.
Yeah.
Because they don't like conflict. How many people don't like conflict? Raise your hand in the in the thing or something. I don't know what you could do. But most human beings do not like conflict.
Yeah.
But we associate conflict with that. Asking what?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. And we're going to talk more about that too, because conflict actually isn't a bad thing. It's been given a bad rap, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking about somebody who's at work and their supervisor says, hey, we're making some changes and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And so person X is going to change this for you. Person A, person B is going to change these things for you.
Change.
And so the process begins with the wrong question. Why am I being asked to change? Why am I being picked out? Why am I, instead of, or here's another one. My brother called me the other day and he told me, hey, I got a review at work, and it was a great review. But there's been times when he got not so great reviews. And so the question is, why did I get this review? Why didn't I get a better review? Instead of, what things can I do in order to have better performance in my workplace or in this particular task that I've been asked to do? Do
you think also, as for someone who is in a position of, let's say we talked about that power, right? Leadership. Do you think that that's actually probably a tool for that person, that when you are actually talking to people about the why, to make sure that you include the what?
Yeah.
Right. I think that is, even when we're dealing with our children, even when we're dealing with one another, how heavy is it just to always come to people talking about why? You know what I'm saying? But how about the what? What can this is what's happening, but what can I do? Right. What are some tools that I can use? Instead of focusing on the things that I cannot come on.
Hey.
The things I cannot change, the people I cannot change. What can be done? Right. What can be done in order to move forward in positivity and in helping a process, Yeah.
So again, we don't throw why completely and totally away.
Yeah.
But it may not be the best question that we can ask. What is a far better question? Yes. What time is it? It's time for us to go. Thank you so very much for joining us in the first night of Let's Try This Again. And we hope that the reflections on self-awareness.
Yes.
And believe me, people, this is not all there is to say on the subject.
No.
We certainly could not do it justice. But we
Yeah.
wanted to share some things that hopefully will get you thinking,
Yeah.
that'll get you talking, and that will help you by God's grace to be more self-aware.
Yes. So if you are wanting to share and invite somebody to come and join us every night this week at 7 p.m. Eastern time, you do that by sending them a link to the Troy SDA Church YouTube page. They can join us there every single night this week until the 11th of February. They can simply go there, or we're also live on Facebook as well, right? On the Stamina for Life Facebook page. And probably will also be on the
we
Troy,
have some technical difficulties.
right? The Troy
Bear with
Church
us.
Facebook page as well. So send the links, let people know to come and join us. And you guys can actually comment in the sections underneath, either on the Facebook page or on YouTube. So I think the only way you can do that though is if you subscribe. So that's the other thing you can do. Subscribe to the Troy SDA YouTube channel. Okay, guys. So thank you for joining us tonight. And yeah, we're excited to be with you this week.
Yep. Have a great evening.
Yes. Take care, guys.